collaboration with the stakeholders and regulations, with the local Jewish communities, with the education governmental bodies as well. So who are the stakeholders? The education expert of the local Jewish communities, education expert in general in the local society, and the governmental education advisor as well. And what is the regulation needs or background of the successful project like this? Political commitment, which is necessary. That was necessary in Hungary as well. As you heard in the last panel, our Hungarian Human Resources Ministry State of Secretary mentioned that was a really strong intention in the Hungarian educational government as well. Willingness to change and, of course, compliance with the European directives. So, just one more thing let me mention, the guest. Many conferences and many workshops, even in the European institution, even belong the Jewish communities. We are talking about the necessity of combating anti-Semitism and how suffered not only the Jewish communities because of anti-Semitism, but the whole society as well. This is a poison not for the Jews, but for the whole society in every society, every European countries. But this is the time now to make an action. Not talking about, not saying about how threatened this anti-Semitism to our communities, but this is the time for do something which affect to the upcoming generation and the long term. We believe seriously taking account some countering anti-Semitism and reduce the further prejudice in the European societies. This project, beyond strengthening regional cooperation and encountering anti-Semitism, can lay the foundation for the pan-European textbook supervisory project to ensure positive Jewish representation. We are ongoing negotiation with the European Commissioner for Education to introduce them every new steps and the new advantage of the ongoing education programs. And then we are ongoing negotiation with several European countries, educational governmental bodies as well. Together with the European Jewish Association experts, we had many meetings and introduction session with the European government officials as well. And we just launched the new project in Poland and Slovakia. And President Hoffman, the president of TFKZ, is our partner, his organization in our partner in Poland as well with the same project. And Slovakia, together with the Jewish community expert, we are working the next project, which we believe will change the next generation knowledge about Judaism, Israel, and the wide range of facts of Holocaust in Slovakia and Poland as well. Thank you very much, and I try to convince you try to find a connection to your country, educational officials, and do a project which revise the textbooks in first elementary and secondary school in your country. All help and all the methodological support by Action and Protection League is ready for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So first of all, there are copies of the survey that our colleague just mentioned. There are physical copies, and you can have a copy if you wanted to, so just see him afterwards. Secondly, obviously, you can also have the PDF version, the online version. From what I heard from your presentation, dear Kalman, I want to say, number one, reaching 1 million students is such an amazing success. But I was really pleased to see that in the things that the amendments that you proposed was not only against anti-Semitism or the issue of Jewish people. I was so happy to hear that you also correct them on what the Bible says. That for me was amazing. I was so happy that you did. So I think maybe we need to do more of that. So we're going to have now a second speaker, and a very distinguished one, and he is the head of Tolerance and Non-Discrimination Department and the OSCE's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, Dr. Kisan Manotsa. Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues and friends. It is indeed a great honor and privilege to be present today and to represent the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, at this very auspicious gathering.
I'm sorry, the microphone is not very loud. Maybe if you can just...
Sorry, we'll just adjust the microphone so you can hear me better. Hopefully you can hear me better now. It's a great honor and privilege to be here and represent the OSCE at this event, dear Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. You may know the OSCE is the world's largest security organization. It has a comprehensive and unique mandate on combating anti-Semitism. Why? Because the participating states of the OSCE long recognized that anti-Semitism not only poses a serious threat to Jews and Jewish communities, but to all of society, and ultimately the peace and security of the whole OSCE region, which spans from Vancouver to Vladivostok. I won't rehearse. We've already heard, and we had this wonderful, wonderful in the way that it captured the reality of anti-Semitism in today's world. Not wonderful because of the message it conveyed. It's an awful, awful message, depressing message. But I won't add to that, except to highlight a few points when it comes to the OSCE region and anti-Semitism. One is, we're no longer talking about a phenomenon that manifests itself only in terms of discrimination, prejudice, intolerance, and harassment. It is about lethal action, lethal attacks and violence. This is deeply disturbing. Number two, anti-Semitism is manifest even in societies where there are very, very few Jews. The third, and this is particularly alarming, is that we have seen in recent years anti-Semitism expressed more openly and more explicitly, including in mainstream political discourse, and particularly online. And fourth is, as we have heard already, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It has created the conditions in societies conducive to the spread of misinformation, disinformation, scapegoating, dehumanizing particular groups, including and prominently the Jews, for causing the virus, for spreading the virus. And one more thing, we have seen repeatedly people trivializing the Holocaust by comparing democratically established public health measures to save lives from the virus, comparing this to the dehumanizing treatment and exterminations of millions under the Nazi regime. Now, we have heard from all the distinguished speakers. This session is about education, about why education is important. It is important, dear friends, because it addresses root causes. Schools and educators can enable and empower young hearts and young minds to be outward-looking, to be all-embracing of diversity, to see diversity as not a threat, but a source of enrichment. And it can enable and empower young people, therefore, to be agents of lasting, powerful, constructive social change. Also, we should recognize that anti-Semitism doesn't just end at the school gates. It is present, sadly, in school classrooms, on school benches, in school playgrounds. But for educators, for schools to do this important work on behalf of us all, they need support. They need training. They need sound policy frameworks. And they need, of course, unyielding commitment. OSCE participating states have addressed themselves to the phenomenon of combating anti-Semitism for many, many years, and they have placed education at the heart of these efforts, common efforts. Included among their commitments is to devise, to put in place domestic, private and public educational programs. We've had some fantastic examples of the sorts of things happening in a number of OSCE participating states already. And they created the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights to support participating states in all their efforts across the human dimension of security, including the area of combating anti-Semitism, tasking ODIHR with the mandate to provide advice, to provide assistance, to provide resources, to provide tools, encouragement, good practices to assist the participating states in this huge endeavor. And I'll just spend a few minutes saying one or two things about ODIHR's approach. Well, one is that largely ODIHR has worked in the area of formal school education, but of course it recognizes that education starts earlier than school and goes beyond school. This is particularly important these days because we all know that young people are exposed to social media platforms where anti-Semitic and racist mockery and worse is rife. So this work needs to start very, very early, be systematic, and have a far wide-ranging reach. Secondly, ODIHR recognizes that to address anti-Semitism, we must engage everyone concerned with the education of a person. Education policymakers, school directors, trainers of teachers, others in civil society, particularly museums, particularly cultural centers and institutes, academic experts. This is a collective enterprise, and everyone plays their part. And we should design approaches, we should design resources, we should design tools to address all of those and create the synergies among and between them so their work can have the desired impact. ODIHR has long seen three complementary and mutually reinforcing dimensions to the educational process: addressing and preventing anti-Semitism through education, providing education about anti-Semitism, and responding effectively to anti-Semitism in educational settings. And we work across all three dimensions. Over the years, we've developed materials. They may or may not be well known to you. A number of these have been developed most notably with partners such as UNESCO and, of course, Yad Vashem, and are available in multiple languages. And these resources address the needs of education policymakers. We have created teaching aids which support classroom teachers to building their confidence and capacity to recognize and effectively address anti-Semitism in the school setting. And we've also developed training curricula designed for trainers of primary, secondary, and vocational school teachers and for school directors which provide practical guidance on preventing and responding to anti-Semitism in and through education. I would say there are 5 foundational principles in which these materials are rooted. One is a human rights-based approach to education, which is about knowing and caring about the other and acknowledging a shared responsibility for identifying and rejecting stereotypes. Then we have the principle of building the resilience of students to anti-Semitism and to other forms of intolerance and discrimination. A third is fostering critical thinking and self-reflection skills, because unless we do not reflect on our own biases, we're not going to know what they are, and they will only be perpetuated, and we will only create the conditions, sadly, where they will multiply and be shared. So we need to reflect, and that's a powerful skill to teach young people. A fourth is integrating a gender perspective, to know actually how and where and why issues of gender intersect with anti-Semitic racism and other forms of intolerance. They're all interlinked. And what we note is, in some cases, the disproportionate effect of anti-Semitism on women and girls. And fifthly, that we ensure complementarity with existing educational fields and frameworks, particularly global citizenship education. Our resources they're not mine, it's what ODIHR, UNESCO, and Yad Vashem have developed, address a whole range of issues central to combating anti-Semitism, including the importance of identifying and debunking conspiracy theories, identifying and collectively rejecting stereotypes and tropes against Jews, teaching, of course, as we've heard, about the Holocaust, teaching about Jewish life, Jewish culture, Jewish history, and as we also heard, the extraordinary contribution historically and today of Jews and Jewish communities to the fabric of societies, to the advancement of civilization. That should be and is the legacy and the pride of all people and all societies. And finally, we do our best to create spaces for exchanges among and between state officials, civil society, educational policy makers, teachers, educators, anyone involved with the educational process, to discuss their approaches, to share what they are doing. Rabbi Kalman's presentation is an excellent example of that good practice that we look forward to hearing more about, to sharing practices, to acknowledging there are gaps, where there are gaps, and how we identify and resolutely address them. And ODIHR, as a resource to the governments and to civil society in the OSCE region, stands ready to collaborate with all of you in taking forward this critical work in the months and years ahead. Thank you so much for your attention, and good luck.
Thank you so much for your speech. And finally, we heard from Croatia, from Bosnia-Herzegovina, from Hungary. And finally, we're going to have a neighbor of my country, Greece, from the Republic of North Macedonia. We have the pleasure of having and the honor of having the Minister of Education herself, Her Excellency, Madam Mila Karovska. Welcome, please. If you prefer to sit down, you can also.
No, it's okay. Distinguished organizers, participants of today's symposium, my panelists, guests, ladies and gentlemen. The fight against negative phenomena that threaten basic human rights will never stop. Because no matter how committed the state authorities and system pursue a policy of zero tolerance of violence in all forms to discrimination and prejudice, there is always a new source. However, this must not be discouraging us, but to motivate us continuously working and upgrading the strategies to fight against any evil in the societies. I must share that we have to fight for human rights protection, but we have obligation to teach our children to continuously fight against any evil in the next generations, because they never they will never have opportunity maybe to understand deeply what happened to the children in a last century, but we need to train them to recognize the first signs of any evil, first signs of reducing the human rights in our countries, and we have obligation to that. Some of those values are in fact lessons initiated by traumatic events in a historical past. But we need to teach them, we need to impose them, because some of those events killed millions of innocent people in World War II. As information, as many of 98% of the members of Jewish community in Northern Macedonia were deported to the camps, more precisely to Treblinka. Anti-Semitism is not just a lesson in textbooks in Macedonian educational system, because it is not just a text written in 1 or 2 pages in textbook. Anti-Semitism is a topic that is systematically discussed on several levels in the educational system. It's integrated into curricula through organized teaching of teachers and pupils, but also we have extracurricular activities that are organized for the student to visit Memorial Holocaust Center of Jewish in Northern Macedonia. From the early age, everyone should realize how bad the abuse of power can be, and we need to be aware of that. To let students to know what bad fortune can create toward people, but also to learn, recognize, and fight against this phenomenon. We are learning more and more about these topics. Some of you are already informed that we start with a specific reform of primary education that directly involve inclusiveness, multiculturalism, tolerance, respect for rights, and diversity in a larger space than before. This means that our educational system will loudly discuss and introduce this value in a primary education, continuously after that in a secondary education, to prepare our child for the future. So I appreciate that this commitment will grow the next generation that can create a better world for everybody. That this commitment will bear fruit, and the fruit will be a new generation that will make a greater contribution to the prevention of this type of phenomenon in the world, and will strive not to happen again. Thank you again for the invitation to be part of this important event, and I hope that we will learn something new and share a positive experience and return to our countries. It was really great pleasure for me to be here, and I wish you a successful symposium and really next steps. Thank you.
Madam Minister, one of the things I really took from your speech was about the importance of recognizing the first signs of evil. Is much more difficult to uproot evil once it takes long routes. So for sure, we believe as an organization that this is one of the most important aspects, the prevention. And thank you so much again for your speech. So I would like to thank all of my panel and to thank you for your participation. And I will hand over now to my colleague Tal Rabina, who is going to present the next panel. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you again for being with us here. My name is Tal Rabina, and I am the Director of Strategy of EGA. As we heard in the previous panel, education is undoubtedly a key tool in the fight against anti-Semitism. The measures mentioned by the ministers of education of Germany, Great Britain, Hungary, and others were very impressive, very inspiring. However, in the age of social media, when every keyboard owner becomes an effective editor of messages, and sorely, as we all know, many of them messages of hatred, incitements, and fake news, education should no longer be seen as just the formal education system defines as school or university's curriculum. When the ecosystem change, we too must all change the tools in order to deal with this phenomena. We must develop and refine tools and tips for reducing and reducing anti-Semitism. And that's exactly what we hope to discuss in the upcoming few minutes. I'm honored to invite MP Marion Lenne, Foreign Affairs Committee Secretary, the National Assembly of France, s'il vous plaît. And she will be with us, hopefully, in a minute. Take your time, it's okay. No, please come up, but slowly, don't fall down. From Albania, it is our honor to host Madame Zamira Gjin, Director General at